I lied to you. Not accidentally, not carelessly. I did it on purpose. It was a deliberate act, not to mislead you maliciously, but to test a theory, to expose something deeper than a fact check or a correction ever could. In my last video, I told you that Zoran Mamdani wanted to make the entire New York City subway system free. That statement was false. Not an exaggeration, not a stretch, a lie. The truth is, Mamdani has advocated for fare-free buses and a freeze on subway fares, but at no point has he proposed eliminating fares for the entire subway system. So why did I say it? Because I wanted to show you how easy it is to shape belief, how quickly a slight distortion can become the foundation of someone's understanding. I said it with conviction. I said it with a smooth narrative. And for many of you, that was enough. You didn't stop to check. Why would you? The tone was confident, the story made sense, and it fit with everything else you were hearing in the video. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Even now, even as I clarify and admit the falsehood, some part of your brain still remembers the original version as reality. Because that's how memory works. That's how the human mind handles emotional information, especially when it's wrapped in compelling storytelling. Disinformation doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, the most effective lies are the ones that feel like they've always been true. They're not constructed with facts, but with feelings. They bypass the rational mind and go straight to the gut. A lie doesn't have to stand up to scrutiny. It just has to survive the moment it's delivered. It has to resonate more than the truth. So let's start with the most obvious and recent example, Donald J. Trump. Trump's political rise didn't begin with a policy proposal. It wasn't sparked by a plan to fix the economy or reduce healthcare costs or reform government spending. It began with a lie, a big one, a racial one. A lie that Barack Obama, the sitting president of the United States, was not born in the country he governed. It was baseless. It was debunked, but it didn't matter. Trump didn't need the lie to be true. He needed it to be loud. He didn't invent birtherism, but he weaponized it. He appeared on cable news, did interviews, dropped tweets, and gave speeches that all danced around one message. Barack Obama was illegitimate. Not just wrong, not just a bad president, illegitimate. That was the seed, and from that seed grew a whole political identity. Trump became the man who said what others were too afraid to say. He painted himself as a truth teller against a backdrop of political correctness and elite censorship. And it worked. The lie gave him a base, a following, a movement. But that was only the beginning. Once birtherism had served its purpose, Trump pivoted seamlessly into another, equally potent narrative. The idea that undocumented immigrants were pouring into the U.S. to commit violent crimes. Again, the data said otherwise. Study after study showed that immigrants, especially undocumented ones, commit fewer crimes than native-born citizens. But again, the facts didn't matter. What mattered was the imagery, the fear, the sense of siege. Trump described the border not as a line on a map, but as a leaking dam holding back chaos. Criminals, rapists, gangs, terrorists. He painted a picture, vivid, dark, emotionally charged, and people believed it. That narrative became the justification for one of his most infamous campaign promises, the wall. It also became the backbone of his entire platform. The fear of the other, the narrative of invasion, the call for law and order, all of it stemmed from that central, unsubstantiated claim. And just like that, a lie became law. A rhetorical strategy became federal policy. And Trump went from fringe curiosity to president of the United States. Because in politics, belief is everything. And belief, more often than not, begins with a well-placed lie. But Trump wasn't the first to write a lie into power. To see how far this technique reaches, rewind to 2003. A time when America was still smoldering in the aftermath of 9/11, when fear was national currency and patriotism was a litmus test. That year, the President of the United States, George W. Bush, stood before the American public and the international community and said something devastatingly consequential, that Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, possessed weapons of mass destruction, nuclear ambitions, chemical stockpiles, biological agents ready to deploy. He claimed Iraq was not just a regional threat, but a global one, potentially weeks or months away from arming terrorists with catastrophic tools of war. And the world listened, or rather, obeyed. Backed by shaky intelligence, cherry-picked data, and an aggressive public relations campaign, the Bush administration sold the invasion of Iraq as not only necessary, but urgent. They presented satellite photos. They cited a now infamous British dossier and intelligence from a single discredited informant nicknamed Curveball. But none of it mattered. The fear had already been injected. The opposition had already been silenced. The machinery of war was already in motion. In March 2003, the bombs began to fall. It wasn't just a policy misstep. It was a geopolitical earthquake. The Iraq War destabilized an entire region. It killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. It opened a vacuum that would eventually be filled by ISIS, one of the most brutal terror organizations in modern history. And the price tag? Over $2 trillion from the pockets of American taxpayers, with interest still accruing. And for what? No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. None. Not even fragments. The entire premise of the war turned out to be false. The lie didn't just take America into war. It gave war a story, a justification, a rallying cry. And then across the Atlantic, another lie, very different in style but identical in function, was quietly preparing to reshape the future of an entire continent. In 2016, during the Brexit referendum, Boris Johnson and his allies launched a campaign that hinged on a single, striking claim, that the United Kingdom was sending the European Union £350 million a week, and that post-Brexit, that money could be redirected to the National Health Service. It was simple, emotional, patriotic, a slogan so effective that they painted it across the side of a red double-decker bus and drove it through the streets of Britain like a mobile promise. But the number was misleading. It didn't account for the rebate the UK received from the EU. It didn't reflect the complex financial relationship between Britain and Europe. And most importantly, the money was never earmarked for the NHS. That part was a fantasy, a political illusion designed to trigger pride and anger in equal measure. But again, the facts didn't matter. The lie stuck. It worked. The phrase became gospel, and the vote passed. The UK narrowly chose to leave the EU, and when the dust settled, Boris Johnson, the man who'd repeated the lie loudest and longest, rose to power. So now let's return to you. You sitting here, watching this video, hearing these stories. I began with a lie, a small strategic one, to show you how quickly belief forms. But the lies we just walked through, Trump's birtherism, Bush's weapons of mass destruction, Johnson's Brexit bus, these weren't small, they were seismic. They altered global systems. They manipulated entire democracies. They did not simply influence voters, they transformed nations. And in each case, the lie succeeded not because people are unintelligent, but because people crave certainty. In a world spinning faster, growing more complex, more chaotic, the truth often arrives too late and speaks too softly. Lies, on the other hand, arrive ready for broadcast. They give people someone to blame. They tell stories where good and evil are easy to distinguish and solutions fit on bumper stickers. And when those lies are repeated enough, when they're packaged properly, and when they tap into real pain or fear, they don't just survive, they dominate. That's why disinformation is so powerful and so dangerous. So the next time a politician tells you something that feels perfectly moral, perfectly urgent, perfectly obvious, pause. Because in this era, the truth doesn't always win. The best story does. And sometimes the best story is a lie.